From career-ending mistakes to Batmobile connections, the legendarily terrible 1965 sitcom about a talking car hides secrets far stranger than its bizarre premise. Discover the catastrophic casting decisions, hidden satire attempts, and unexpected Hollywood legends behind TV Guide's second-worst show of all time that haunted its creators for decades. Fact 1. Jerry Van Dyk's career-destroying decision. In 1965, Jerry Van Dyke faced one of the biggest career decisions of his life, and he chose spectacularly wrong. The younger brother of Dick Van Dyke was offered not one, but two golden opportunities that could have changed everything for him. First came the chance to play Gilligan, the lovable, bumbling first mate on a new sitcom called Gilligan's Island. Van Dyke read the script and thought it was absolutely terrible, later telling reporters it was the worst thing he had ever read in his entire life. He turned it down flat. Then came another offer to join the cast of The Andy Griffith Show in 1965, right when Don Knotts was leaving the series. Van Dyke said no to that one too. Instead, he decided to take the lead role in My Mother the Car, a show about a man whose deceased mother comes back as a talking automobile. At the time, Van Dyke thought he was making the smart choice because the concept seemed more believable, and the show had experienced producers behind it. But everything went wrong almost immediately. My Mother the Car was savaged by critics, canceled after just one season of 30 episodes, and later became known as one of the worst TV shows ever made. Meanwhile, Gilligan's Island became a massive hit that ran for years and never stopped airing in syndication, turning Bob Denver into a television icon. Van Dyke spent decades watching Gilligan's Island reruns everywhere he went, a constant reminder of what could have been. Years later, he admitted the experience was a nightmare and said he deeply regretted turning down both opportunities. When asked about his brother Dick's advice on taking My Mother the Car, Jerry said Dick thought it sounded good at the time, then added, "I never asked him for advice after that." Fact 2. The Batmobile creator built the car. The man who created one of the most iconic vehicles in television history also built the car for one of TV's biggest flops. George Barris, the legendary custom car designer who transformed a Lincoln Futura concept car into the famous 1960s Batmobile, was hired to create the stunt car used in My Mother the Car. When the show's production was approved, the producers needed two versions of the fictional 1928 Porter touring car. The main car had already been built by hot rod designer Norm Grabowski from a 1924 Ford Model T, but they needed a second vehicle specifically for stunt work and special effects sequences. That's where Barris came in with his expertise in creating vehicles for Hollywood productions. The stunt car he built looked identical to the hero car on the outside, but it had a remarkable secret hidden inside. Barris designed the vehicle with special controls mounted below the rear floorboards, where a short human driver could sit on a tractor seat completely out of sight. Using a system of levers and telescopic mirrors, this hidden driver could operate the car and make it appear to drive itself, which was essential for scenes where the possessed automobile needed to move on its own without anyone visible behind the wheel. This wasn't a new trick for Barris, who had used similar innovations on other famous TV vehicles he created throughout the 1960s. Despite his incredibly busy schedule working on multiple Hollywood projects at the same time, Barris himself actually served as the stunt driver for many of the scenes, crouching in that hidden compartment and operating the Porter through the special control system he had invented. The car that Barris built still exists today and has passed through several collectors over the decades. Fact 3. It was meant to be satire. The biggest shock about My Mother the Car is that it was never supposed to be taken seriously in the first place. Co-creator Alan Burns, who went on to create the beloved Mary Tyler Moore Show, revealed in later interviews that he and his writing partner Chris Hayward originally conceived the show as a parody that would make fun of all the ridiculous fantasy sitcoms flooding television in the mid-1960s. Shows like Bewitched, with its witch married to a normal guy, and Mr. Ed, featuring a talking horse, were huge hits at the time, and Burns and Hayward thought it would be hilarious to create something that satirized the whole genre by pushing the absurdity even further. Their idea was simple. If audiences would accept a talking horse or a suburban witch, why not a dead mother who comes back as an automobile? The problem was that somewhere between the initial concept and the final product, the satirical edge got completely lost. In a candid interview with the Television Academy years later, Burns admitted what had gone so terribly wrong. He explained that Chris Hayward and he had come up with what turned out to be the worst idea for a series in the history of the world, saying their plan was to do something that made fun of shows like My Favorite Martian and Bewitched, because they were so popular. Burns confessed that somebody must have thought their script was funny when they sold it, but the critics absolutely did not see the humor. He stated plainly that he probably spent the rest of his life trying to live that show down, emphasizing that he promised they really meant for it to be a satire, but it came out to be the worst of all the shows they thought they were satirizing. Fact 4. Ann Sothern did it for the money. Ann Sothern was brutally honest about why she agreed to voice a talking car in what would become one of television's most notorious failures. When reporters asked the acclaimed actress in September of 1965 why she had taken the role of Mother in My Mother the Car, she didn't sugarcoat her answer or try to spin it into something more dignified. She simply told the Richmond Times-Dispatch, "I am interested in money." It was a refreshingly blunt admission from someone who had spent decades building a respected career in Hollywood. By the time she signed on to the show, Sothern had already starred in over 60 films and headlined 2 successful television series of her own, Private Secretary and The Ann Sothern Show, earning multiple Emmy nominations along the way. She had worked with some of the biggest names in entertainment and was considered a talented comedic actress with impeccable timing. So why would someone with that kind of resume agree to be the voice of a reincarnated automobile? Sothern saw it as an easy payday that required minimal effort on her part. She described the job as essentially radio acting with a television paycheck, meaning she could show up to a recording studio, read her lines into a microphone, collect her money, and go home without having to memorize blocking, wear costumes, or interact with other actors on set. It seemed like a smart, low-effort gig at the time. She even told reporters that she played the character as a pretty hip character, though she admitted her dialogue hadn't exactly been earth-shattering so far. Despite her initial pragmatic attitude about the role, Sothern eventually came to regret her decision to participate in the show. Fact 5. The Porter car never existed. The entire premise of My Mother the Car revolved around a supposedly rare and valuable 1928 Porter touring car that the villain Captain Manzini desperately wanted to add to his collection, but there's just one problem with that setup. No such car ever exists in real life. The show's producers did their homework and researched automobile history specifically to avoid duplicating an actual vehicle, but they made an interesting discovery in the process. There actually was a real Porter Motor Company that operated in the United States, but it only existed from 1900 to 1901 and produced just a handful of cars during that brief time. That original Porter Company made steam-powered automobiles in what was called the runabout style, which looked nothing like the touring car featured in the show. There was also a second unrelated Porter Automobile Company that operated from 1919 to 1922 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, producing only 36 luxury performance cars designed by automotive engineer Finley Robertson Porter, who had previously created the famous T-head Mercer automobile. But again, none of those real Porter vehicles resembled the fictional 1928 model that appeared on the series. So where did the name Porter actually come from if the producers weren't copying a real car? The answer is a clever inside reference that most viewers would never have caught. The car was named as a tribute to Don Porter, an actor who had been Ann Sothern's co-star on 2 of her previous television series, Private Secretary and The Ann Sothern Show. It was a subtle nod to their working relationship that turned into the foundation for an entirely fictional automobile brand that fans spent years trying to research, not realizing they were searching for something that never rolled off any assembly line. Fact 6. TV Guide's second worst show ever. More than 3 decades after My Mother the Car aired its final episode, the show received an official dishonor that permanently sealed its place in television history. In 2002, TV Guide magazine published a list ranking the worst television shows of all time, and My Mother the Car came in at number 2 on that infamous roster. The only show that ranked worse than it was The Jerry Springer Show, which took the top spot for worst program ever broadcast. This wasn't just some random internet poll or casual opinion piece, but rather an official ranking from one of the most respected authorities on television programming in America. TV Guide had been covering the television industry since 1953 and was considered the definitive source for TV listings and criticism for generations of viewers. The fact that they singled out My Mother the Car nearly 40 years after it had been canceled showed just how deeply the show had embedded itself in the cultural memory as an example of everything that could go wrong with a television series. What makes this ranking particularly notable is that TV Guide had literally thousands of shows to choose from across decades of broadcasting history, including countless forgotten failures that had come and gone without anyone remembering them. Yet My Mother the Car stood out so distinctly as a disaster that it earned the second worst spot even when competing against reality TV, game shows, soap operas, and every other genre that had ever appeared on American television. The ranking essentially transformed the show from a forgotten one-season flop into a legendary cautionary tale about bad television, ensuring that new generations would continue learning about the talking car sitcom long after everyone involved with its production had moved on to other projects. Fact 7. James L. Brooks worked on it. One of the most successful producers and writers in television history got his start working on what would become known as one of TV's biggest disasters. James L. Brooks, who would later create The Mary Tyler Moore Show and serve as an executive producer on The Simpsons for decades, was part of the writing team for My Mother the Car during its brief run in 1965 and 66. At the time, Brooks was still early in his career and taking whatever work he could find in the television industry, which is how he ended up contributing scripts to a Satire show about a talking automobile possessed by a dead mother. The experience clearly left an impression on him, though not a positive one. Brooks went on to become one of the most celebrated figures in television comedy, winning multiple Emmy Awards and eventually transitioning into film directing with movies like Terms of Endearment and Broadcast News. But he never forgot his time working on the failed sitcom, and he apparently held on to his feelings about the show for many years. When Brooks became one of the executive producers of The Simpsons in the late 1980s, his personal history with My Mother the Car gave the show's writers permission to reference and mock the notorious series multiple times throughout the years. The animated comedy would occasionally make jokes about the talking car sitcom, using it as shorthand for terrible television whenever the writers needed an example of a truly awful show. Brooks's connection to both programs meant that The Simpsons could poke fun at My Mother the Car without any awkwardness, since one of their own executive producers had actually lived through the experience of working on it and understood exactly why it deserved to be ridiculed. Fact 8. The car had multiple automotive parts. The stunt car used in My Mother the Car was one of the most bizarre automotive mashups ever created for television, combining pieces from multiple different manufacturers into a single Frankenstein vehicle. While the show presented the car as a pristine example of a 1928 touring automobile, the reality behind the scenes was far more complicated and considerably more modern than viewers realized. After casino magnate William Harrah purchased the stunt car following the show's cancellation and it eventually went to auction in 1984 after his death, the official auction catalog revealed the true nature of what had been assembled. The catalog described the vehicle as having a carnation red body with a white top, but more importantly, it disclosed that the car had been created from parts taken from 4 completely different automotive manufacturers. The base started with components from a Ford Model T, which was the most common car in America during the 1920s and provided the foundation that would look authentic for the era. But the builders didn't stop there, adding pieces from a Maxwell, a Hudson, and a Chevrolet to complete the construction. The most significant modern addition was hidden under the hood, where the producers installed a powerful 283 cubic inch Chevrolet V8 engine, connected to an automatic transmission. This was the same engine Chevrolet was using in its performance vehicles during the 1960s, which meant the supposedly antique Porter had more horsepower than most new cars on the road at the time. The result was a vehicle that looked like it belonged in the 1920s, but could actually outrun genuine vintage automobiles by a massive margin, making it much easier and safer to film the driving scenes the show required, without worrying about the limitations of authentic period technology. Fact 9. Network censors banned a backfire. NBC's Broadcast Standards Department made some truly bizarre decisions about what was and wasn't acceptable for My Mother the Car, including one particularly strange censorship call that affected the pilot episode. The network censors reviewed the original pilot and insisted that the producers delete a specific scene where the Porter automobile backfired, though the exact reasoning behind this decision was never fully explained to anyone involved with the production. What could possibly be objectionable about a car backfiring, especially in a comedy show about a talking vehicle possessed by a ghost? The censors apparently thought it crossed some line, and their word was final in the television industry of the 1960s. But the problems with the pilot went far beyond just that one scene. The entire first episode had been filmed in black and white, which was still common for television productions in the early 1960s, even though color broadcasting was becoming more standard. After NBC reviewed the completed black and white pilot, they decided the whole thing was unsuitable for broadcast and ordered the producers to start over from scratch. The network made them completely refilm the pilot episode in color this time, which meant reassembling the cast and crew, rebuilding sets, and spending additional money that the production could barely afford. The original black and white version that included the forbidden backfire scene never aired on American television as intended, essentially becoming a piece of lost media for decades. However, Canadian television stations apparently had different standards than their American counterparts, because the original black and white pilot eventually showed up on Canadian broadcasts multiple times over the years, giving viewers north of the border the chance to see the version that NBC had rejected, and judge for themselves whether a car backfiring was really too offensive for primetime audiences. Fact 10. Casino magnate owned the stunt car. After My Mother the Car finished its single season and was canceled in 1966, the stunt car used in the production ended up in the hands of one of America's most legendary collectors of unusual automobiles. William Harrah, better known as Bill Harrah, was a casino magnate who had built a gambling empire in Reno, Nevada, and he had a serious passion for collecting cars that went far beyond what most people would consider a hobby. Harrah assembled what was widely recognized as one of the largest and most impressive special interest and antique automobile collections in the entire world, housing thousands of rare and unusual vehicles in massive warehouses. His collection included everything from genuine vintage classics to quirky, novelty cars, and apparently the fake Porter from a failed sitcom fit right into his vision of automotive history. Documentation from 1986 confirms that Harrah owned the stunt car, with a Nevada title showing his name as the registered owner. When Harrah died in 1984, his enormous collection had to be dealt with by his estate, and many of his vehicles eventually went to auction or were sold to museums and other collectors. The My Mother the Car stunt car had quite a journey after leaving Harrah's collection, spending time at the Seal Cove Auto Museum on Mount Desert Island in Maine before moving to the Hollywood Star Cars Museum in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, where tourists could see it alongside other famous vehicles from television and film. The car changed hands again when it sold at the Dragone auction in September of 2017, part of the historic Festival 35 at Lime Rock Park in Lakeville, Connecticut, where it fetched a final price of $50,000. Fact 11. Arrested Development revived the theme song. My Mother the Car got an unexpected second life nearly 4 decades after it went off the air, thanks to the critically acclaimed sitcom Arrested Development bringing it back into the cultural conversation. In 2003, Arrested Development aired an episode titled My Mother the Car as part of its first season, and the show's writers made sure to acknowledge where that title came from by directly referencing the original 1960s series. During a scene in the episode, characters Gob and Lindsay are shown sitting on a couch watching television together, and what appears on their TV screen is actual footage from the original My Mother the Car sitcom. The scene specifically features the show's theme song playing in the background, letting viewers hear the distinctive and somewhat absurd opening music that had introduced the talking car premise to audiences back in 1965. This wasn't just a throwaway joke or a quick visual gag that disappeared in seconds. The reference was deliberate and prominent enough that anyone watching Arrested Development would know exactly what show was being called back to, even if they had never seen the original series themselves. For younger viewers who had grown up long after My Mother the Car had been canceled and forgotten, this was potentially their first exposure to the notorious sitcom and its bizarre concept. The Arrested Development episode essentially introduced an entire new generation to the story of Jerry Van Dyke talking to his dead mother through a car radio, cementing the show's legacy as a legendary failure that people still remembered and referenced decades later. By featuring the actual theme song and footage rather than just mentioning the show's name and dialogue, Arrested Development gave audiences a direct taste of what the original series had been like. Fact 12. Sammy Davis Jr. covered the theme. 1. Of the most unexpected things to come out of My Mother the Car was the attention it received from one of the biggest entertainment stars of the 1960s. Sammy Davis Jr., the legendary singer, dancer, and actor who was part of the famous Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, decided to record his own version of the show's theme song and actually perform it for audiences. In 1966, the same year that My Mother the Car was canceled after its single season, Davis was hosting his own musical variety show called The Sammy Davis Jr. Show, and he chose to use the sitcom's theme as an opening number for one of his episodes. This wasn't just a brief mention or a comedy sketch making fun of the show, but rather a full performance where Davis sang the song with his characteristic style and showmanship. What makes this even more remarkable is that Davis didn't just perform it once and forget about it. He liked the song enough to record it professionally and include it on not one but two of his studio albums that were released around that time. The albums were titled The Sammy Davis Jr. Show and That's All, both of which featured the My Mother the Car theme, alongside other songs from his variety show repertoire. For a show that was being savaged by critics and would soon be remembered as one of the worst sitcoms ever made, having someone of Sammy Davis Jr.'s caliber and stature in the entertainment industry record and perform its theme song multiple times gave it a strange kind of musical legitimacy that nobody could have predicted, creating an odd footnote in both Davis's career and the show's legacy. Fact 13. The show had no laugh track. My Mother the Car made a production decision that was highly unusual for sitcoms in the 1960s, and that choice ended up making the show's problems even worse than they already were. Unlike virtually every other comedy series on television at the time, My Mother the Car aired most of its episodes without a laugh track, meaning there was no recorded or artificial laughter added to tell viewers when something was supposed to be funny. During the 1960s, laugh tracks were considered essential to the sitcom format because they helped audiences understand the rhythm and timing of jokes, and they could cover up moments when the comedy didn't quite land as intended. Shows were typically filmed in front of live studio audiences whose real laughter was recorded, or producers would add canned laughter in post-production to create the sense that people were enjoying what they were watching. But the makers of My Mother the Car decided to go without this safety net for most episodes, leaving the jokes to speak for themselves without any audio cues. This turned out to be a disastrous choice that critics noticed immediately. Reviewers pointed out that the absence of a laugh track created what they described as tonally confusing work, where scenes that were clearly intended to be humorous would play out in complete silence when the jokes failed to be actually funny. When a sitcom joke doesn't work and there's a laugh track playing anyway, viewers might at least understand that something comedic was attempted even if it wasn't successful. But without that audio cushion, every failed attempt at humor in My Mother the Car just hung in the air awkwardly, making the unfunny moments feel even more uncomfortable and highlighting exactly how poorly the comedy was working. Fact 14. Johnny Carson kept it alive. My Mother the Car might have faded into complete obscurity after its cancellation in 1966, if not for the constant attention it received from the most powerful man in late-night television. Johnny Carson, who hosted The Tonight Show from 1962 until 1992 and was watched by millions of Americans every weeknight, developed a habit of using My Mother the Car as a punchline in his opening monologues, and he kept making jokes about it for more than 10 years after the show had been canceled. Carson had an enormous influence on American popular culture during his 3 decades hosting The Tonight Show, and when he decided that something was worth mocking repeatedly, it became embedded in the national consciousness, whether people had actually seen it or not. Most failed television shows from that era simply disappeared after cancellation and were forgotten within months. But Carson's relentless jokes about the talking car sitcom ensured that it stayed in the public memory long after anyone should have been thinking about it. Every time Carson brought up My Mother the Car in a monologue, he reinforced the idea that this show represented the absolute worst that television had to offer, turning it into shorthand for failure that his audience immediately understood and laughed at. The fact that Carson kept returning to this particular target year after year, rather than moving on to mock other failed shows, gave My Mother the Car a strange kind of immortality that worked against everyone involved with its production. By the time Carson finally stopped making jokes about it in the 1970s, the show's reputation as television's ultimate disaster had been so thoroughly established that it would never recover. Fact 15. A real toy model was released. In one of the strangest merchandising decisions in television history, a major toy manufacturer decided to create and sell a model kit based on My Mother the Car, even though the show was already struggling in the ratings. Aluminum Model Toys, better known by their abbreviation AMT, was a well-established and respected producer of plastic model car kits that hobby enthusiasts would buy to assemble and paint at home. In late 1965, while the show was still airing its first and only season on NBC, AMT released a 1/25th scale model kit of the fictional Porter touring car that kids and collectors could purchase in stores. The company was betting that the show would be popular enough to make the model profitable, but that gamble didn't pay off since the series was canceled just a few months later. What makes this model kit even more peculiar is that AMT didn't actually create an accurate replica of the car that appeared on television each week. The real TV car had been built using a 1924 Ford Model T touring body as its foundation, but AMT chose to use a 1927 Ford touring body for their plastic model instead, making their version noticeably different from what viewers saw on their screens. This means that AMT produced an inaccurate rendering of a vehicle that was already completely fictional to begin with, since the 1928 Porter never existed in the first place. Model kit collectors today consider the AMT My Mother the Car kit to be a fascinating piece of television memorabilia, precisely because it represents such a spectacular failure on multiple levels, being a toy based on one of the worst shows ever made, and not even being faithful to that show's own made-up automobile design.